Rally cap time, Bears fans. The Lions dropped a bomb on the Bears in the form of a 50 burger and left their former OC the unenviable task of picking through the rubble. Now Ben Johnson faces an uphill climb trying to figure out how to make this Bears team win after a brutal start. Today on Bear Era, we'll outline what led to the 0-2 record, but more importantly, what the Bears need to prioritize to get out of the hole. So grab your shovels, we're digging in. Welcome back to Bear Era, fans. As bad as it is in Chicagoland right now, we still have to talk about it. That's what we're here for, is to try and tell you why it's bad and how it might get better. So we'll do both today, but we do have to start off with things not going so well. Ciaran, after 2 weeks, how you holding up, friend?
Time is a flat circle when it comes to the Chicago Bears. That's how I feel. It's a tough one. It was something that you could potentially estimate that this could have happened at the beginning of the season when you have a new head coaching staff. There were so many problems last year, but there's more problems, I think, than people wanted to admit going into the season.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say that when you look at a season, there is the sort of best case scenario and there is the worst case scenario. And usually the truth is somewhere in between. And if we look at this Bears team after 2 weeks, they're way closer to the worst case scenario, which everybody says, yeah, but all the bad things won't happen at once. Right now, for the most part, almost all the bad things are happening at once. And the weight of expectation was so heavy in Chicago with Ben Johnson coming on board that everybody was really hoping it would skew towards the other end. So the difference feels even larger than it actually is. But we're going to dive right into it, not waste your time this week on Top Trio. Ciaran's going to lead off with his concern. I'm going to follow up with mine, and then we're going to do a combo, which is really looking forward to the Dallas game and saying, hey, how can they get some basic things fixed? Obviously, everything that's wrong with this team isn't going to get fixed in a week, but there are things that they do control, and they need to get those in order as fast as possible. Ciaran, what are you going to lead off with this week?
So there's two little small things that I'm going to talk about. Originally, I was only going to talk about how the reasons why some of these, let's say, problems have occurred so early on in the season. But then listening as we record here, we've already heard a couple times from Ben Johnson, and something that he said today, which is Wednesday, which alarms me a little bit when he was talking about how they are not practicing like a championship team. And look, I understand that, because when you're talking about a team that didn't even deserve to win the amount of games that they did last year because of the way they performed. It just so happens that they won a couple at the start of the year, and we knew what some of those big problems were. Certain guys not putting in the effort, and like you hear straight after the game and the coach is referencing it, and people kind of guesstimated on who those players were going to be, and then he to come out a couple of days later and say it again on practice. Like, to me, that just screams of he's getting sick and tired of this, and it's only 2 weeks into the season, and I don't think it's going to be long before it's going to become very clear to Chicago Bears fans who those players are, because we've heard it multiple times from many different people that Ben Johnson is not willing to take that. They'll give players an arm's length to either sink or swim, and if they don't decide to put in the effort, then you will very clearly see when other guys start replacing them in terms of the snap share. So don't be surprised. I don't want to completely call out specific players, but anybody looking back at the game, even I said this yesterday, don't even watch the second half, because players do tend to give up when they're down by that much. Look at the first half when they were still in that game, and some of the things that you saw in the second half, some of those players were doing it in the first half as well. So That's why I say to look there. My key thing here, though, is why has it gone so wrong? It has gone wrong because the Bears were not a team full of depth going into the season, and they did not address some of the key areas that we spoke about before heading into free agency, before heading into the draft. We said they need more up front in terms of the defensive line, especially at edge rusher. They need more depth at corner, and they need to address the running game. Now, obviously, I spoke about the running game last week. I'm not going to use the same points again, but the reality is the only addition at that on kind of that position was a 7th round rookie in a rookie draft class that we spoke about for weeks and months, that it was one of the better ones, and you're seeing that these first 2 weeks in the NFL. It's not even just going out and trying to get an Ashton Genty or a Marion Hampton, who are the top guys, or a Travion Henderson, and you missed out on those. Like, we spoke about guys like Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, right? That for a whole year he didn't get to play because of academic stuff, but then shows out in the combine, and you look at similar stats in terms of where measurables, and it matches up to what you saw into the performance level. And now he's the starter for the Washington Commanders. So it's not a surprise. But the problem is, you can't, if you know you want to fix that position, like we heard all the rumors about the Bears were interested in Travion Henderson in the 2nd round, and they missed out on him from New England getting him, but that doesn't mean you give up and don't go for one of the other quality players in the positions. You had 3 second-round picks. You're telling me like no, there was nobody at that position, or nobody that was going to be able to fill that role. So it's the thing that I don't like overdrafting for need, but I also don't like when you have a serious need and you fail to do anything. Like that's a big problem. It's something that I've always kind of had a gripe with Ryan Poles. Like, you need to have a good balance between being aggressive and being conservative. And ultimately, he doesn't. I don't think he's shown the knack for that over the last couple of years, and it shows. Like, they are unfortunate, and I've said this all week. I'm not blaming coaches, because I know Ben Johnson can coach offense. I know Dennis Allen can coach defense. So that leaves it with one or two things. It's the players and it's the front office. The front office are the guys that select the players, so quote unquote, that's where a lot of the criticism needs to be placed at, because Dennis Allen can only do with what he has. It's not his fault that Jalen Johnson is injured and likely out for the season. It's not his fault Terrell Smith is out for the season. It's not his fault that Zay Frazier, who is one of your draft picks, is out for the season. Like, those are things that you should have known. Even with Kyler Gordon, who's still out here, he's had injuries every single year. He's not missed loads of games. He's missed, I think it was 4 games one year, 3 another year, 2 another year. So you know you can't rely on him for every single game. Jalen Johnson has had different injury spells, so you know that you're going to have good depth there. You should have realized last year, Tyreek Stevenson, that he was struggling, and it's going to take a monumental effort to get him back to where he was in his rookie campaign. And like, the problem is the Bears don't have depth at that position now, and their starters are out. So there's not much you can fix there for Dennis Allen, so I'm not going to blame there. The problem is with Poles, you can go through so many of the draft classes, and the reality is he's had 4 draft classes now. There's not a single Pro Bowler there. There's not a single guy that you would say is probably a top 10 player at their position. And there's too many high draft picks that are not making the field. Your first round pick from this year has barely got the ball when you even compare it to what Tyler Warren is doing with Indy. And it's not the fact that it's a tight end. Like, Tyler Warren could be here and the same thing could be happening, right? So, But then you have your 3 second-round picks, and 2 of those are healthy scratches. You have your 5th round pick, who we just said is out for the year because of an issue before he was brought here. Again, something that you should be doing. You should be digging into absolutely everything, and like, that's an issue. But it's not just an anomaly of it's this year. It happens. Like, I tried to explain part of it away. Like, if you were telling me that Ozzy Trapillo is a backup right now because you want to put him in a position that when he takes over from Braxton Jones, he's your starter moving forward. I said it in the off season. The best case scenario is Braxton starts the season and then Ozzy takes over and wins that job, and you can trade away Braxton, and that's a good scenario. But you have him as a healthy scratch. Like, he should be like your swing tackle right now if he's a second round pick and you believed in him so much. Like Luther Burden, he's the first second round pick that you made this year, and there was plenty of good players there. And I like Luther Burden. I said it before, he was one of my favorite receivers in the draft class this year. But he should be involved in the offense more than he is. Shamar Turner, who you put in you said some of your concerns there, and they've been valid. He hasn't been out there either. But you can't just say it's this year. Last year, after Caleb and Rome, like Ciaran Magaji, like he's not involved, and he's a third round pick. These aren't like 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round picks that are a shot in the dark. Like a second or third round pick in their first or second year should be a contributor for you. And the problem with Poles is that over the years he's had plenty of high draft picks, and what you're getting from a performance from those players is not high enough for those picks. And that's an issue because guys that you drafted like 3 years ago should be your kind of Pro Bowl players, or they should be the core of your team moving forward. And that's not really the case. Like the year that you did have Jervon Dexter and Darnell Wright, 2 very good players, but the rest of that draft, like the year before that, like you had Kyler Gordon, but now Jaquan Brisker's had a bunch of injuries and he's looked worse. Like these are guys and high draft picks that you should be saying that's a Pro Bowler at that position. That's a guy that we know is going to be here. He's definitely getting a second contract. I went through the list of them. I put a tweet out as well of the 36 picks that Ryan Poles has made. I only put a grade of good to like the development path is on point right now to 7 of them. 7 out of 36. He's the only GM that hasn't drafted a Pro Bowler. It's a problem, and unless it gets swung in the right direction moving forward, you're going to have the same issues that we're having at the start of every year. Like, those are the players that have to be the ones that win you games, and there's just not enough for them. Like, coaches aren't miracle workers. They can only do what they have at their disposal, and there's too many holes. Like we said, you can't be paying the defensive line the amount of money you are and not getting the output that you would be hoping for. And that's a problem. The allocation of resources on this roster isn't right. We've said it for the past year or so, and we're hoping that they would fix it. Like, EJ, I'll kind of put this to you. How many times this offseason did they make a move and we're like, I hope it works, versus being pumped about a move happening?
I was pumped about the O-line for sure. I thought the depth at cornerback was pretty good. The injury to Terrell Smith was unfortunate. I also thought Tyreek Stevenson was really going to react well under Dennis Allen's system and be a star. He has all the physical capabilities to do that. Players can go 2 ways. Development is not linear, and he has gone in the hole. He has gone in the tank the first couple of weeks. Is he going to stay there the whole season? I don't know, but it's not looking great right now. So I actually thought cornerback depth was pretty good. I was more worried about safety depth. Running back depth we talked about. Last year it was injuries with the offensive line. This year it's injuries with the cornerback room. It's every year. And again, guys that you have drafted who you thought were going to help, whether it's Ciaran or Ozzy Trapillo. And look, it's early for Ozzy. He could still turn into a very good, very solid player for the Bears for a long time. This isn't a referendum on Ozzy. This is, in general, the moves you've made haven't paid off. Now, the offensive line we're going to talk about. The free agency additions, the trade, like those things have largely worked out for the Bears, and we'll actually show some evidence that despite the running game sucking, it's not the offensive line's fault. So they're doing pretty well. Overall, this is, like you said, a flat circle, a drumbeat we're very used to. Draft and develop is not a strategy the Bears have executed well in a long time, and that's difficult. So everybody's hoping for the best from every single player, and they're getting it from, like you said, very few of them overall. And over time, that will catch up with you. It is a Jimmy's and Joe's league. You need talent on your roster, and the Bears are not talentless by any stretch, but they're not as talented as they need to be. And right now, like, dead ass, the Bears are one of the worst teams in the league. And we just want them to not be one of the worst teams in the league. That's the place to start, and they haven't made it there. Right now, they are bouncing off the bottom of the table in a lot of key statistics, and those are the facts. The NFL's a meritocracy. Your results on the field dictate who you are as a football team. Right now, who the Bears are, not who they could be or who they're going to be, but who they are right now after 2 weeks, is a bottom-of-the-barrel NFL team, and that is really rough to watch again. So my point of emphasis so far is lots of fingers are being pointed at the offense. I'm going to point fingers at the defense because Dennis Allen, like you said, can coach defense. He's going to have to. He has a bunch of pieces. He has a better than a bottom-of-the-league roster. The Bears are not the least talented defense in the NFL, but their statistical results in the NFL are at the bottom of the barrel right now. The defense is failing. There is no other way to put that, and it could get worse before it gets better, given the injuries to Jalen Johnson, other starters. It's not great. If Jalen's gone for the whole season, that is a move that could cause a cascading failure throughout the defense. When you lose your best player on defense, I don't care if he's a cornerback or an edge rusher or anybody else, everybody else in that unit, and again, we know coverage and rush support each other, is put on alert and has to do more, has to stretch, has to sometimes play out of position. And that is going to be the case, certainly with the secondary. And that means the pass rush has to get cranked up, and it hasn't right now. So the defense is giving up 39.5 points a game over the first 2 weeks. If you're giving up 40, I don't care who you are. The Ravens are the only team in the league right now. There's one team in the league right now that could survive that defensive performance, and it's by 1 point. The Bears are giving up 39.5, and the Ravens are scoring 40.5. So the Ravens, if they got lucky with this defense, would be winning by 1 point per week. That is way too thin a margin. Until the defense improves, yes, the offense must improve as well, but the offense could throw up 35 and they're still going to lose by 4 or 5. And that is not good enough. There's no other way to put that. So to put that in perspective, and like the Bears are the worst team in the league at this by far. They are 6 points per game below or allowing more than the second to last team in that category, which is Miami. To put that in perspective, if Miami was allowing 6 less points per game, they would move from 31st to 24th in the table. So the Bears are off the back here by a bunch, and it's not close. So if Dennis Allen and company can't stop the bleeding with the players they have who are healthy, and there are enough of them to perform better than they have through the first 2 weeks, the rest of it's kind of a moot point. Of course we want to see Caleb improve, and he did from week 1 to week 2. But he's not going to improve enough because literally no team in the league could do that if you're giving up 40 a game from the defense. So Dennis Allen and the defense have to find some answers, and they have to do it quickly, because if they don't, the Bears are just going to keep dropping games. There's no way to mount an offense in the NFL that routinely puts up 45-plus points.
Yeah, it's a problem. Like, you need to be a balanced defense, because you can not have a fantastic pass rush and not a fantastic coverage, but like if you're average at both, you can get off the field. And it happens, because I go back to last year when we were doing, I think it was our first podcast when we started this, and it was right before the Carolina Panthers game. And do you remember the amount of injuries and the amount of players that defense was missing?
Yes.
And we were saying, how are they going to be able to recover this? And for a few weeks there, when the Bears did play them, it looked bad. But go and then look at the improvement levels of the defense to where they weren't killing themselves, where they gave the offense an opportunity, and that's what's going to have to happen here. Like, it may end up being the Bears waiting for Kyler Gordon to get back, and they're going to be like, well, you got to play outside corner because we need you out there. And it might end up being that. And you not letting Tyreek Stevenson play inside, and he's just be like, we're going to make this as simple as possible for you, and we're going to try and just limit the bleeding. And you're just not going to get smoked, and that's it. Like, you can give up a couple of yards here, but you're not going to give up a touchdown from 45 to 50 yards out. Like, they might have to do that, and it might have to not look the best, but it'll get them off the field, and it'll mean they won't be conceding 45 points a game. Like, that is what they're probably going to have to do in the short term until it does improve. And the obvious thing is we can blame the corners and all this, but the front seven has to get to the quarterback as well. Like, if they don't get to the quarterback, like, you're making it worse on your DBs who are already struggling. They're struggling because of injuries. What's the excuse of the front seven? Like, Montez Sweat's still out there, Dio's still out there, Javon's still out there, Billings is there. I know Grady Jarrett has been injured, but you're pretty healthy and you're not getting to the quarterback, and you're paid handsomely to get to the quarterback. So they also need to get their ass in gear and help out those guys that are struggling that would normally not be your starting players.
Yeah, and Dennis Allen's got to crank up the pressure a little bit. If he's not getting home with 4, we know that he likes to blitz. He's going to have to. And Ben doesn't have to look very far for an example of how to make this work. Last year, the Lions lost more games to injury than almost any team in the entire league, especially on defense. On defense, they did lose more games to injury than any team in the league last year. And still, after the Aiden injury, after other injuries on the defensive line, after they lost corners late in the season, we kept saying, oh, no, they're done. They can't possibly. And they actually got better statistically. And the reason was pressure. They were like, screw it. You know, don't spare the horses. We're going to blitz everybody. And it worked right up until they got kicked out of the playoffs because they just couldn't hold up anymore with all the attrition. So there are examples of this working with even less firepower than the Bears have on defense personnel-wise. So they need to start making it work. And that brings us to our third point. What are the things that they need to do to get this back on track? Because there are too many things to fix in 1 week. We know that. But there are things that they can control. And so we're going to give you an order of operations for getting this back to stable. So starting this week against the Cowboys, number 1, burn the pre-snap penalties with fire. If guys can't get it right at this point, after all the OTAs, after training camp, after preseason, after everything else, if you can't get it straight, you sit. And I know that sounds harsh, but I don't care. You cannot do this. It is something you control. And this team has started behind the sticks far too often. It's going to be our stat of the week when we get there about how often and how much more often that is than the league average. It's the first thing they need to get a handle on. They have to get it done. I think what you said at the top about Ben starting to show some impatience here is good. He should be impatient with this. It is not something to be tolerated, and it needs to get fixed. And the the love language of NFL players is playing time. You can talk about contracts, you can talk about awards, you can talk about anything else. When you sit a guy, hey, starts and downs, reps played in this league are rare, and if they give them up, they will pay attention. And you have to set a line that I don't care which player it is. If you end up with 2 false starts in a game, you're done for a quarter. I'm sitting you down, and we'll see if the guy behind you plays better. And if he does it, we're just going to keep going through him until we find a guy that can hold his water and play decently. And that may be a tough combination at this point. But if you're starting with pre-snap penalties, you're giving yourself basically no chance. And the Bears are doing that. So that's number 1. Number 2, I already said it. Dennis Allen's got to bring some pressure on defense. If you're not getting home with 4, you got to get home because your secondary is not going to hold up for long with all the injuries. You're going to need it with the injury to Jalen Johnson alone. Again, take a page out of, late season Aaron Glenn's playbook from last year with Detroit, which was, screw it, we're bringing everybody. And they did it a lot, and offenses had trouble dealing with it. Now, there are certain quarterbacks where you're going to die by the blitz. That's okay. You're going to die either way here, so you might as well die trying to cause trouble, right? Cause some good trouble, cause some problems. Maybe you get some turnovers out of it, limit their possessions, whatever it is. He blitzed more with less talent, and it worked. And the Bears are probably going to have to adopt some version of the same approach, because if Dennis Allen sits back like he did in week 2 in a lot of soft zones and expects his coverage to hold up for 4.5 or 5 seconds, they're going to get carved up no matter what. So they can't afford that. And then they got to get the running game on track. And the running game has been the whipping post of Bears Twitter for a week now. And yes, the running game as a whole has been terrible. A lot of people think that means both the offensive line and the running backs have not been getting it done. That's not correct. So got to get the running back reads cleaned up, because this is going to shock you Bears fans, but yards before contact per rush, Chicago Bears are the number 1 team in the league, 1.89 yards before contact per rush. They're blocking it up. Unfortunately, flip side of the coin, nobody in the league gets less out of free yards than DeAndre Swift. Among all the running backs with 25-plus carries right now, DeAndre Swift is 4th best at 1.9 yards before contact per attempt. That tracks very nicely with the offensive line stats, within 1/10 of a yard. Bears are still, despite that space given DeAndre Swift, 31st in rushing EPA and 32nd, dead last in the league at rushing success rate. In other words, for what's blocked up for down and distance, are they getting that or are they not? Are they exceeding that or are they coming up with less? And they are coming up with literally the least in the league from the best run blocking largely in the league if you're looking at space before contact per play. So offensive line has got it together once they can hold their water and get past pre-snap penalties. Running backs, largely DeAndre Swift, because he has been the lead back for this team by far, is not getting it done. So what does that mean you do? Well, you can't do a lot now. You could have done more in the draft and free agency. Certainly, we were hoping to see an addition to that room besides a 7th-round draft pick. Nothing against Kyle Monangai. I think he's a good player, but I think that's a pretty heavy expectation to put on a 7th-round rookie. So you've got to scour some practice squads. You've got to investigate trades. Do whatever you can to add some firepower to that room. Just some targets. Keontae Ingram is on Kansas City's practice squad. He's got a decent history in the league, but my number 1 target is Michael Carter. He's on the Cardinals practice squad. He's a former Jet. He is good, like DeAndre Swift, both in the passing game, and he is much better in the running game. He is a similar size, but his reads are better. He takes advantage of what's blocked for him far better than DeAndre Swift does. I'm not even going to talk about the salary difference, but I think you need to basically sit DeAndre Swift down at this point, because the opportunity cost of keeping him in the lineup right now is way too high. You are saying, hey, we are calling these plays, we are blocking them up, we're giving you these opportunities, what are you going to do with it? And he's basically falling on his face. He is the last ranked running back in the league amongst starting running backs at taking advantage of those things that you've laid out for him. Until that improves, until the running game improves, the Bears aren't really going to go anywhere.
And this is the problem, because like last year we said the same thing, right? Like, he's fine when he's in space because he doesn't have to make a decision, but the vision isn't there. Like, you can even go back to watching the play that he fumbles the football. Great defensive play, but like, if he's watching what the O-line is doing, he sees that Jonah Jackson basically just killed the dude and there's a big hole that he could have ran through. Right? And that just takes... There was one I mentioned the previous week where I think it was beside Colston Loveland when he was in. There was a massive hole that he could have went through, and instead he ran into one of his offensive linemen. Like, it's been a thing that we spoke about all last year, that like between the tackles he doesn't have the vision to make the right play, and it was a reason why he was essentially taken out of the red zone plays last year, and it was given to Roshan because that's something that Roshan can do. And I'm holding out hope that Roshan hasn't been involved because they're easing him back from his injuries, and we know he's had issues in the past. So I'm hoping that that is the case, but you kind of have to do what other teams do. Like the Eagles just made a trade to get another running back in from Jacksonville. Like you need to scour teams that have multiple backs where maybe a young guy is starting to get more playing time and there's a veteran there that you can get through the season with. I'm not saying that this is the player I want, but in a similar situation to where you're seeing at Houston, that Dameon Pierce is probably going to either get traded or cut because they've added in guys like Nick Chubb and Mixon and stuff like that. So he's going to be the one that goes out. But like, you need to scour other teams as well, where maybe they thought they were going to have like a 2-back system, but it just turns out one guy has become the lead back and there's a talented player that's available. Like the Bears have, I've said this for a while now, and I've kind of, in my own mind, I'm at this point where you have to stop talking about this rebuilding thing and you actually have to be aggressive and be aggressive to winning now. You brought in the coach you want. So now you have to start winning football games. So you have to be aggressive. If he says, I can't do it with this running back room, I need someone, well, you better go out there and you better look at, like you said, practice squad, trades, who could potentially be available in a few weeks. Like, put in the effort so that when they do become available, you're already there and you make that move. Or it could come to where there's a player on your team that isn't doing it for Ben, isn't doing it for Dennis, and you're like, okay, we're going to make him available for trade. And if a team comes in that's interested and you actually are interested in one of their players at a position you need, like, be aggressive with it and be like, this is what we want. Like, you can't just sit back and accept that, well, this is what we have. Not, you have to go out there and give the coaches that you spent a lot of money on, that you coveted, give them the tools that they need to put their proper system in place. Like we said it last week, the Bears running philosophy doesn't match up to what Ben has done for his entire career. And that's because he doesn't have the individuals there. Like, he was probably expecting a different outcome in the draft when it came to running back, and he didn't get it. But at that stage, free agency is already come and gone. You haven't brought anybody in, and now you're kind of stuck with what you have. It needs to get better, like you said. Like, if a running back, we've seen it over the years in Chicago where guys are getting hit the minute they get the ball. That is not the case here. Like, you can see where there's an opportunity for Swift to make a decision, and the problem is he's just making the wrong one too often. And that's the reason a lot of these plays are not working. And then ultimately, the running game also looks worse because when you go behind by 2 scores, a lot of coaches do have to go towards the pass because you're chasing. Like, that's the problem. You need to be getting leads, and that will then help the running game a little bit more. But again, if a player at that position who's getting the ball most of the time is making the wrong read and making the wrong play, there's nothing a coach can do. They can only put you in a position to make a play. If you don't make it, that's your fault.
I would agree. All that positivity, he puts in air quotes, leads us to our stat of the week, which is not that much more positive. The Bears have 6 false starts penalties, tied for 31st in the league. The league average, by the way, is 2.34. So we are almost getting close to 3 times the league average. Completely unacceptable. They also have 4 offensive holding penalties. Those are a little bit more fickle. Those can be like interceptions. Sometimes they get called, sometimes they don't, but they are tied for 24th already in the young season in offensive holding penalties. So both of those are putting the offense behind the sticks more often than this team can afford based on its talent level and overall cohesiveness right now. Got to get those cleaned up if the Bears are going to get a clean runway. That brings us to Northwatch, our series where we bring in correspondents from around the NFC North to tell us how their teams are doing. I don't think Arif's section is going to be all that hopeful after what happened to the Vikings and a possible injury to J.J. McCarthy, but we'll let you tell him. The other two we're just going to have to put up with this week. So Nick and Tom, be gentle.
We're going to take the North and never give it back.
Hey, this is Arif with Wide Left reporting to you on the Vikings. We're coming off of a really rough game against the Atlanta Falcons where the offense was stuck in second gear, couldn't seem to get going, and that was primarily the fault of their young, essentially first-year passer, J.J. McCarthy, who held onto the ball too long, couldn't process his reads quickly enough, and ultimately they floundered as a result. Defensively, they did reasonably well. Of course, they gave up 200 yards on the ground, but they also only allowed field goals until the final drive where they intentionally allowed a touchdown in order to get the ball back with enough time to score twice. That, of course, didn't happen. They lost the game. But the big news from that game is that J.J. McCarthy suffered a high ankle sprain, so he's not going to be available for their next week matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals. Instead, we'll see starter Carson Wentz, who that's personally a nightmare of mine, but we're going to have to make do. The Vikings will have J.J. McCarthy out from 2 to 4 weeks. There's actually a good chance that we won't even see him until after the bye week following the international games in week 6, which means that we're going to see a couple of backup performances over the next couple of weeks, including against Jake Browning, the backup quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals. Meanwhile, they're going to get Andrew Van Ginkel and Jeff Okudah probably back from the concussion protocol, but unfortunately, center Ryan Kelly and backup left tackle Justin Skule entered the concussion protocol that game. Aaron Jones is a hamstring injury. That's going to be worth monitoring. And Christian Darrisaw might come back. This is a rough season.
Guys, Nick Baumgartner back here again with another Lions update. Obviously, as Bears fans know, week 2 goes much better for the Lions as the opponent changes. Green Bay was awesome in week 1. Things get a get-right game, so to speak, for the Lions in week 2, and also a statement game, I would think, as well, as the Lions' first opponent, or first time going against Ben Johnson, obviously. And while I don't believe there's any personal animosity there at all, I don't think Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson have a beef. I don't think that's a thing. I don't think that's a thing with anybody on the offensive side. It seems like some of the guys on the defensive side might have been hurt that he went to the Bears. But I do think that Campbell and the Lions, John Morton and those guys wanted to make a point to the NFL and to probably the local people here in Detroit that the Lions are still the Lions. They still have the same stuff that they were running, all the years that Ben was here. They still have all the talent that they had that made it sing. And, that continued in spades there against the Bears in a game where they scored 52 points. And they kind of felt like they should have had probably 66 at least. And frankly, if Jalen Johnson wasn't out there for at least a half, they probably would have got there. So all cylinders firing for the Lions in a game where their confidence probably gets right back to where it needed to be. Now they head to Baltimore, obviously, in a situation where things get much more difficult. Still 1-1 though, right? So there's not much of a margin here. You still got to try to find a way to win this game on Monday night in hostile environment. But really the big thing, though, I guess the takeaway would be is that after the really disappointing performance in week 1, Lions are able to wash it out, get back with a sense of urgency, and now go even in the division. And now I believe they'll have a wait here until at least the end of October, maybe early November, before they have their next division game. So back on the horse, Bears, not so much. But hey, the Ben Johnson offense does not click overnight. That'll be something that takes some time. And I do think that there's already been signs of things building. There's just not enough consistency yet. So we'll see how it all goes. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you all next week.
Well, another week, another win for the Green Bay Packers, who sit atop the NFC North. But seriously, heading into this week, a short week against the Commanders, who were a top 3 rushing team last year, Packers fans were wondering, is our defense for real? They had a great performance against the Lions last week. Could they do it again? And they did. And so this is probably the first time as a Packers fan in a while, since they got Za'Darius and Preston Smith, that I felt this good about that defense. Now, all that being said, it is week 2. There's still a lot of time to go. But considering the Lions were able to smack the crap out of the Bears, sorry about that, it made me feel even better because there was question marks if the Lions were even that good this year. But to see that they still have those offensive capabilities makes me feel a lot better because the quality of the opponents the Packers have gone against the first 2 weeks has been pretty damn high. And so now heading into Cleveland, the Packers are 2-0. Yeah, it's a pretty damn good start, and we're getting closer and closer to the ultimate prize. Go Paco.
One of these days, we'll get to be the positive ones and get to dunk on our Northwatch colleagues, but it might be a little bit. In the meantime, we're going to bring out our other colleague, super producer Mike Mercado, and he's going to do Mike on the mic for the week. Here he goes.
Thank you, EJ and Ciaran, and welcome in, Bears fans, to another edition of Mike on the Mic here on the Bear Era Podcast. I'm Mike Mercado, and it has been a rough 2 weeks to start the season for the Chicago Bears and Bears Nation. And things don't get any easier heading into Week 3 against the Dallas Cowboys. So this week, the question that has been on top of the mind of every single Bears fan is not an actual question, but more a word. And that word is clarity. Can this Bears team, under Ben Johnson, Caleb Williams in his second season, find out what they're good at? Because so far in 2 weeks, we've seen a team that's undisciplined, can't protect the quarterback, can't get pressure on the quarterback, has been decimated in the secondary, has had blunders at coaching decisions. This is a team that looks gassed out at the end of games. And after 2 weeks, we have not been able to figure out what do they do well. So Week 3 gives them an opportunity to get right and to answer the question, to give us that clarity on what exactly are the Chicago Bears good at. You could start by getting pressure on Dak Prescott, by minimizing the damage that you have with CD Lamb, putting points on a not very good Dallas Cowboys defense, and walking away with the victory, getting your first win of the season and getting back on track. That is what Bears fans have their eye on heading into Week 3. Can they get some clarity on what the Chicago Bears do well? And that'll do it for us on this edition of Mike on the Mic here on the Bear Era Podcast. I'm Mike Mercado. Now back to EJ and Ciaran.
Well, with all that, and it was a lot, we get to watch a game versus the Dallas Cowboys, Ciaran.
We do. Do we have to?
I was going to say, could you be any less excited about it? But I completely understand where you're coming from. It is difficult to watch this team right now. They're not helping themselves. They are certainly not the best version of themselves. Not to say that they won't be. I do believe that progress will be made. I do believe that Ben is getting impatient. And I don't think that he forgot how to coach. He's got a lot of stuff to wade through. I think more stuff than any of us really thought. And he's going to have to get it sorted. It is a huge challenge, but that's why you take the big bucks and the head coaching title. So we'll see if he can get it done. But our partners are supporting us through all of this. Homage Clothing and Blue Wire Podcast. So if you want to support us, support them. It certainly helps us. Oh, as always, like and subscribe. Leave us a comment. Tell us what you want us to focus on. Even if the Bears season starts to spiral, we'll be here for you the entire time. Thanks for watching Bear Era, and we'll see you next week.